But there's also just a tremendous amount of Bitcoin that is held in the Muslim world, right? Like every sovereign wealth fund in the Gulf holds billions of dollars of Bitcoin. It's not currently productive capital because there's a lot of concern about interest and speculation in DeFi. But we think that there's the ability to help address that liquidity. Like Islamic finance is a $7 trillion industry globally. So there's no shortage of opportunities to find the intersection of the two. Hi, I'm Peri. I'm the founder of Tyabit. We are the world's first Bitcoin-denominated Islamic financial institution. I first got into Bitcoin in 2011 because I was just a dork with a computer in high school, and I stumbled across the white paper and started just mining on my CPU. And I've been involved with it and then crypto more broadly ever since. Throughout the years, I've done various startups that I've been involved with as a founder or just as an early stage employee, as well as a good amount of academic work when I was doing my PhD at NYU. So yeah, I guess I'm an engineer by trade, a little bit of an academic and a business person and all of the above. The more I learn about Islamic finance, I'm not Muslim personally, but my co-founder is, and I'm kind of the academic on the team, so I've been diving into it a lot. The ideology around Islamic finance and around DeFi are really similar. So many of the principles of Islamic finance center on things like shared risk and shared reward, profit shares as opposed to interest, chains of custody. So there are gaps that are unfilled currently in Islamic finance broadly because the logistics of doing them in a manner that is Sharia compliant make them impossible, but they're not theoretically not allowed. So there's no shortage of opportunities to find the intersection of the two. We're really excited to work with the Arch team and the Arch ecosystem because they share the value of a Bitcoin-denominated world, which is, at the end of the day, where we want to see things going with Tyabit. Like I said, we're trying to build out an ecosystem of DeFi opportunities, new financial instruments, and broadly speaking, a Bitcoin-denominated world. So it's helpful to have a ready-made ecosystem partnership that we can leverage to work with other companies that are in this ecosystem, help them become Sharia compliant, deploy TVL, and find ways to kind of move that vision forward. One of the things that's valuable about the Arch ecosystem is that the contracts themselves are easily auditable. One of the most important things in terms of Islamic finance is obviously Sharia compliance. So we are going to be working with other companies in the Arch ecosystem to go through their actual contracts and identify whether those things are compliant and how they can be made compliant if they're not. So having a really easy to work with contract platform in a well-known and well-practiced programming language is very helpful, as opposed to having to deal with any sort of more novel or bespoke system. I think we'll be able to establish a set of ready-made standards, maybe even libraries, for example, to say if people want to do certain types of DeFi things like liquidity pools, those are actually pretty inherently Sharia compliant. They represent fractional ownership and shared profit, but just making sure that actually on a line-by-line no code basis that those things are compliant is easier when you're working in well understood technical structures. Yeah, so it's very much our goal in kind of our first phase of rollout to build an ecosystem of Sharia compliant apps and investment opportunities. Obviously, in the back end, that involves being able to deploy capital from depositors into then places that are requiring this TVL. So having an ecosystem like Arch, where a lot of these things live, does make it easier to build. Not everything in the Arch ecosystem will be probably part of the Tyabit ecosystem, but it will be easier to say, okay, well, these are all the things we do know there, and therefore we just, as an institution, can on-ramp capital into the Arch, system, and then deploy from there into their respective relevant contracts. So having it sort of all in that one place is very helpful, and even to be able to do kind of contract-to-contract things as is necessary. Obviously, while then leaving room for things in other, types of financial arrangements as well. A big part of the reason that we approached this the way that we did is that there's a lot of skepticism within Islamic finance about crypto and DeFi, but there's pretty much universal agreement that Bitcoin is halal. So trying to take Bitcoin and then make it productive capital is like, we only have to do one thing. Like, I don't have to convince the government of Qatar or Oman to buy Bitcoin because they already do that. So I just have to provide an opportunity to use it as productive capital in a way that is compliant with the principles of their religious philosophy. Whereas there are a few other things that are in this ecosystem, the crypto ecosystem, trying to do Sharia compliant DeFi on like Ethereum or Solana. And there are a few things that are out there which are cool and maybe we'll work with them too. But we think that the thing that's going to make us uniquely positioned to succeed is that we are so Bitcoin forward. We are Bitcoin denominated. In the future, if we create financing, like we'd love to see Bitcoin denominated mortgages, for example. And actually some of the principles with Islamic finance make that easier. It's because if we're going in and out of dollars, we're dealing with money problems in a way that if we just say, we lent you 10 Bitcoin and you pay us back 10 Bitcoin and everything's fine, it's actually easier. So we think that there's a lot of reason to live in a Bitcoin denominated world to make things work on chain, to do kind of Sharia compliant financing in a modern world. I think it's difficult in the Bitcoin space because we don't have a central foundation. Like I noticed this recently when I founded the Bitcoin Baddies, obviously inspired by the Peri Baddies. And, I can't just call up the CEO of Bitcoin and be like, hey, sponsor a villa for me, because there is no such thing. So it's, this is a good thing, but it gets very decentralized. And so we're always needing to find communities and form communities. And that's true from everything to like building to event management. So it's helpful to have these spaces of people where you're well connected and you know each other and everybody needs something and everybody has something to give. And so it's always like me as a founder, I have capital to deploy and I need places to deploy. And I have other friends in the ecosystem that are founders that need TVL. So trying to kind of have these spaces where everybody can help each other out. I'm one of those people, I believe very firmly that the rising tide raises all ships. And I'm glad to see that that's more, it seems to me like the vibe we see around here is that there's a bunch of founders and a bunch of people building, and there's no shortage of opportunities. In the short term with Tyabit, our hope is to have a platform where we can take both institutional capital and consumer capital and deploy it into various investment opportunities throughout the Bitcoin ecosystem. Those are obviously going to have to be Sharia compliant. That's really the most technically difficult part of this process right now, is working with other founders, with other protocols, really digging into the weeds of how their code works and understanding whether certain changes have to be made to help them then get through that compliance process. But it's really nice to have things kind of all in one place there, because I think our hope is that if you're a consumer in, Indonesia, and you are wanting to be more involved in Bitcoin, you can open up our app and say, great, Robinhood-like, choose your own adventure with the investments, but that anything that's in that space is fine, right? It's halal, it's okay. And so then you have this opportunity to stake with Arch if you want to, or invest in a stable coin if you want to, or LP a DEX for a bridge or anything that you might want to do. And so it's our hope to be able to kind of be a matchmaker in this sense of capital that's already out there and really like bullish on Bitcoin, but skeptical about DeFi. And then companies that need TVL, and specifically Bitcoin-denominated TVL, can offer Bitcoin-denominated returns. So our hope is just to be able to kind of bring those things together. Our hope with Tyabit is that we have the ability to introduce significant capital from the Islamic world, both institutional and consumer, and to be able to offer that in investment, TVL, or venture, or any other number of ways to other apps in the Bitcoin ecosystem that need it, as long as we can work together to make sure that those things are Sharia compliant. In some ways, this actually lends itself really well to a lot of the principles that we're working with in Islamic finance, but some things do require high frequency and low latency and obviously lower transaction fees. So one thing that is not theoretically a problem within the prospect of Islamic finance is high frequency trading, buying a thing, selling it at another price, totally halal. But there is a rule in Islam that if you are going to sell someone something, you must actually possess it. So in practice, high frequency trading is not done because it's all paper trading, and paper trading is haram because you're selling someone a thing you don't actually have. The beauty of a high frequency blockchain environment, such as is possible within Arch, is that each of those transactions represents a legitimate change in custody. So we have the ability to do non-speculative high frequency trading, which is totally Sharia compliant because you're never selling a thing you don't actually own, as opposed to in the traditional financial market where it's not possible. Yeah, so the origin story is I was between projects looking for the next thing that I was going to build. And I was talking to my co-founder, who's a good friend of mine that I've known a long time in this ecosystem, and we'd been wanting to build something together. And we sat there. It was like, Peri, the problem with building in DeFi is I'm Muslim, not a public interest, not a public gambling, and I feel like that's so much of what it is. And I kind of just said, well, why do we build Islamic finance on Bitcoin then, right? It's a huge market, huge amount of liquidity that's there, and it's got to be doable, right? So yeah, I definitely know. I understand that I probably don't look at me and say like, she probably runs a Muslim bank, but yeah, that's kind of where it came from. As my co-founder, it obviously comes from that religious philosophy, and to me, it makes sense. The principles of DeFi and the principles of Islamic finance are actually remarkably similar.